Awesome. So hi everybody and welcome to SEAL 101, which is our introductory SEAL training. And as you might have seen from the event description, today's webinar is going to cover all of the basics of using SEAL. I wanted to start just by thanking everyone for taking time out of your day to attend this webinar. It's really great to be able to see people and talk about one of my favorite library things, interlibrary loan. So I like to start this training off with a really brief PowerPoint. It's just like 5 slides that answers some of the basic questions new users might have about SEAL, things like how it works, who's involved, what circumstances you should use it under, and how to deliver materials. And everyone is kind of coming into this training with different levels of experience with SEAL. So the PowerPoint just kind of helps to make sure that we're all on the same page. And then after the presentation, I will jump right into SEAL and I will demonstrate some workflows. So I'm going to stop periodically throughout the training to check for any questions. So please feel free to type questions in the chat kind of as they come up. And then when I stop, I'll address them. Or once I've stopped, you can kind of unmute yourself and then ask the question verbally. So if you haven't met me before, my name is Kelsey Milner, and I am the Resource Sharing and Cataloging Librarian at Southeastern. This is a roadmap of how the webinar will be structured. After the PowerPoint, I'll be doing live demos on creating a SEAL account, searching the catalog, placing and managing requests, filling requests, and generating statistics. I'm also going to end by showing you some helpful resources for SEAL, including our manual and our training videos. And so you'll leave today completely ready to use all SEAL features. I'd like to start this training by sharing a little bit more about who Southeastern is and kind of where we fit into the broad library landscape. So we're a membership organization serving libraries and other cultural institutions in the 8 counties that are listed at the right. And we provide services to libraries of all types, public, academic, special, and school. And we're one of 9 similar councils throughout New York State, each one of us kind of representing our own different region. So to drill down a little deeper, I'm going to talk about kind of the regional systems that comprise Southeastern. So we have 8 unique library systems. These include 5 school library systems, Dutchess, Orange Ulster, Rockland, Sullivan, and Ulster. And then we have our 2 public library systems, Mid-Hudson and Ramapo Catskill. And then we have what we call the Southeastern system, which is kind of everybody else. And that includes academic libraries, hospital libraries, and special libraries as members. And I also wanted to highlight one of our out-of-region participants, the New York State Library. So as part of their mission, the State Library lends materials freely across the state, and they asked if they could participate in SEAL, and they are a great lender and a really good resource for academic and kind of state-specific resources. So right now, in general, we have about 179 libraries that participate in SEAL. So how does SEAL work? SEAL is an option when you need an item that's not available through your library and it's not available through system holds. So our kind of tagline for how SEAL works is search and email, answer and load. So users search the SEAL catalog, which pulls live item records from libraries. And once you locate a specific item, you can choose a potential lender from a list of participating libraries that have the item available. An email is automatically generated to them when you place a request asking if they can send the item, and they can answer right from the email. So they can say, yes, I can send it, or no, I can't. And then, they send the item. And it has SEAL has many other features, such as a directory of participating libraries. We have the ability to track items via item statuses. So you can say, like, I received an item, I'm sending an item back. We have a statistics tool, and we also have borrowing and lending request histories, which kind of keep track of the requests that you've placed and the requests that you have received. So what can you expect to get through SEAL? There's a variety of items you can get through SEAL. Overall, you're generally going to have the best luck receiving copies of books. You can also request physical items such as CDs, DVDs, and audiobooks. I will say some libraries choose not to lend these due to them being a little more delicate and more expensive to replace. Our directory of participating SEAL libraries actually has a list of the item types that each library is able to loan. And this is something that you can also determine on behalf of your own library. There's some things you can kind of expect that you won't be able to get through SEAL. This includes ebooks and a lot of electronic resources. Often these aren't allowed to be lent to kind of vendor or license stipulations. It might also be a challenge to receive very new and very popular titles. A lot of times libraries will restrict these to their library or system for a set period. And a lot of times you can kind of see that an item is new by looking at its call number, because sometimes it'll be shelved that way. It might also be a challenge to receive things like reference books, archival materials, or special collections materials, anything where it's kind of a challenge to leave the library. The last thing I wanted to touch on before we hop into our demo is delivery. So I think of delivery as kind of the backbone of interlibrary loan. It's kind of what makes the whole thing possible, but delivery can also be a little confusing. So there's a few different methods you can use for seal, and these options really depend both on the library that you're working at and the library that you're delivering to. So Mid-Hudson and RCLS libraries can send materials back and forth to one another using their couriers, which meet twice a week to exchange items. And RCLS and Mid-Hudson have routing slips available, which you can use to send seal items to the courier. And a little bit later, I'm going to show you where you can find some additional information about delivery. And we also have several libraries using Seal who participate in Empire Library Delivery, or ELD for short. And this is a statewide delivery service managed collectively by the 9 library resources councils. And Seal libraries that participate in ELD can use the service to send items to other Seal libraries as well. And so RCLS and Mid-Hudson are both ELD members, in addition to several of the academic libraries that use Seal. And kind of any other deliveries that you would have, such as when you're delivering to a special library or a school library, you would need to use kind of a shipping vendor like US Mail, UPS, or FedEx. And this, and as I mentioned later, I'll show you where you can find some more information about delivery. Okay, so that's my presentation. So before I hop into the demo, I just wanted to stop and see if there are any questions so far. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for Seal. I'm just going to make it a little bigger so it's easier to see. So you guys, if I did that right, you should be seeing Seal. Okay. Okay, so I'm on the Seal homepage. So this search bar here can actually be searched by anyone who comes to Seal, such as, patrons or the general public. You do need an account to place a request, and Seal accounts are limited to library staff members. So I mentioned I was going to start this training kind of from the very beginning. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to make your own Seal account. So Seal users can actually have their own individual account with their personal information, like your name, your email. So you don't necessarily have to share a Seal account. So multiple people at your library can have their own individual accounts, and then we'll link them all together kind of under the umbrella of your library. So once you're ready to create your account, the first step is to click Staff Login, located at the top right hand of the page. And then from here, you would choose the middle option, Create New Account. So the first thing you see is a section for a registration code. And this is how we kind of keep track of new accounts at Southeastern and make sure that everyone who signs up for an account has at least kind of touched base with us or received some training. So this code is SEAL 2024. I can never type right when I'm in front of people, but so SEAL 2024, if you use that code, you'll be able to create an account. So from there, you would put in your staff email and then create a username. So this username is totally up to you. Just any kind of username that would be easy to remember. One recommendation is to use your first initial and last name. You can also use your email address if it happens to be unique to you. So from there, you would fill in the rest of your contact information, your name, your institution information, and then we have this section for Library of Congress location code and OCLC symbol. These are just if you happen to know them, but it's totally optional. We'll actually look up those codes for you. From there, you would select whatever home library system you belong to. And we also have this option, filter own system. So when you go to place a seal request, often you'll see a list of all the libraries that have the item available. And so that includes libraries from your own system. So just for example, if you were part of Mid-Hudson, you would see other Mid-Hudson libraries if they have the item. So you can actually filter out libraries from your own system. If you don't want to see them in the request screen, it'll just kind of clean it up a little bit and have fewer libraries. And this is totally an optional feature. You can kind of decide if that's something you want to do. And then from there, we have our terms and conditions of use. So you would just kind of read through these and see if they're all agreeable to you. We do have a regional ILO code and procedures, and they're both linked here, so you can kind of take a look through them. And these kind of break down borrowing and lending responsibilities. They touch on things like, responsibilities, renewals, billing, due dates, how to deal with lost and damaged items. And later on in the training, I'm going to show you where you can, find other copies of these documents in other places. So among other things, the code and procedures kind of touch on what I sort of think of as the golden rule of ILL, which is that borrowing libraries are responsible for any materials they request, basically from the minute it leaves the lender's shelf to the minute that it's placed back on it. So if all these terms and conditions are agreeable to you, you would click accept terms and conditions of use, and then you would click create new account. So basically what happens then is an email is generated to us at Southeastern, letting us know that there's a new account. So we work on setting that up kind of in the back end of the system. And eventually in a day or so, you'll receive an email from the address noc@sunnylurk.org, basically confirming that your account has been set up. And it will include a link that you can click to go ahead and set your password initially. So once I'm going to go back to the home screen. So once you have your login information, you're all set to start placing and receiving requests in Seal. So the next thing I want to show you is some of the main account features in Seal. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. So again, to log in, you click staff login, and we have this reset your password option. So if you ever forget your password, you can put in your username or email address, and you'll get a link to reset it. So I'm just going to go ahead and log in. So we did a big update on Seal last October, and we kind of changed a little bit the structure of your account menu. And so before, all of your options kind of came in as a list under here, but now they're in a left-hand side navigation menu. So basically any page in Seal that you're on, you can kind of navigate to a different page really easily. So I'm just going to go through some of these different features, starting with edit profile. So user profile, this is where you can modify information that relates to your specific account. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that. So this is where you can change the email address that's affiliated with your account. It's where you can change your password. We also have this feature that I wanted to share called additional email. So when you place requests in Seal, it's linked to the borrower. So let's say if I made a request, I would receive updates about that request to my email. But if you want other people at your library to receive copies of those requests, like say you have maybe a shared borrowing email, or you have two people who cover Seal borrowing, you could put them in this additional email field, and basically they'll be CC'd on any borrowing requests that you placed. And so you can also change your contact information here. And this is also where if you did want to go back and turn filtering your system on or off, this is where you can do it. So if you make any changes to your user profile, just be sure to hit save before you navigate away. Because I have definitely done that many times where I changed something, didn't save it, and I'm like, why is my new password not working? So we also have a library profile. And this is a little different than the user profile. This is kind of a profile that is for your entire library. And this profile can actually be seen by everyone at your library who has their own individual Seal account. So this is where you can edit all of the contact information for your library. And this is really important to keep up to date and accurate, because this is kind of how libraries will get in touch with you if they need to mail something to your library. This is the address that they can use. So we have this library IL email. And so this is where lending requests are sent. So whenever anyone places a request to your library, this is where that email will go. So you can kind of determine who you want to receive lending requests. So you can, like we did, we have multiple libraries, multiple emails. So you can put in emails and you just separate each email with a semicolon. People do it in kind of different ways. So you can sort of figure out a workflow that works best for you. Some people do shared Google groups and they'll have it forwarded to multiple people. Some people have a shared email. So you can kind of determine what strategy works best for your library. So this, the contact information. Another thing you can do in your lending profile is suspend your library's lending status. So if your library is ever temporarily unable to fill seal requests, like it could be from, a closure of a building, the seal people are, on vacation, there's limited hours over the summer, or anything like that, you can really easily turn off lending for your library. And basically what this does is it totally removes your library as an option to place a request to. So you shouldn't get any sort of stray request if you've turned off lending. So you can determine a suspension end date. So first, what you do is you change this to yes, and then you would determine a suspension end date. I'm just going to make sure I don't accidentally suspend myself. So as you can see here, if you don't pick a date, the system kind of defaults to 7 days. And that's just because we were having some issues with, people turning themselves off as lenders and kind of forgetting to turn themselves back on. So if you don't put in a suspension end date, automatically you'll become active again after 7 days. And then we have this note, which basically just tells you what your current status is. So we're currently receiving requests. So another new feature in Seal that kind of came with the October update, we now have delivery suggestions for lenders. And like I said, delivery is such an important part of ILL, but it's also kind of a complicated part. So we wanted to take the guesswork out a little bit. And so when you go to fill a request, it'll give you suggestions for a delivery method that you can use. And this is how those suggestions are generated. So you would just indicate in your profile what delivery options you have available to you. So for me, for example, we don't participate in ELD. We're not part of a library system courier, so we keep those at no, but we can mail things through, commercial couriers and US mail. And so you would kind of need to check the delivery options for your library and see what's available to you. And so for public libraries, you do need to keep the first two checked just to ensure the accuracy of the suggestions, and you guys do have access to both of those options. We also have items willing to loan. So this, I mentioned, you can indicate the types of materials that your library is able to send out through Seal. And if you indicate you can't lend a particular item type, it's kind of, your library is filtered out as an option to place a request to, so you shouldn't receive any request for it. And this taking a look at this and making determinations can really save you a little bit of time because you won't receive requests that you can't fill. Also save the borrowing library a little bit of time because they'll, if a lender can't send something, they're not going to send a request that can't be filled. So if you make any changes to your profile, just be sure to hit submit before navigating away. One thing that I like about this page is that you can actually see when it was last updated. So I can see that the last change was made by me on November 15th. And like I said, anyone who has a Seal account at your library will be able to see this page and make changes to it. Another new feature that we have is view library accounts. So this is basically just a list of the library staff at your library who currently have Seal accounts. And so if you ever need to add a new account or remove an old account, you can just contact Southeastern and we'll clean that up for you. So this is just a way of kind of checking in and seeing what accounts are currently active at your library. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was request status. So you're able to see a list of the requests that you placed and the requests that you've received from other libraries. So if I click on borrowing, it'll take me to a chronological listing of all the requests that I have placed, and it starts with the most recent one. Every request in Seal is assigned a unique interlibrary loan ILL number. And this is the same, the number is the same on both sides of the transaction. So you can kind of email the other person and refer to, the ILL number, and it'll be the same for them. So every request history kind of comes in with additional information, like it'll say the title, who the lender is, what the due date is, and how it was shipped. And then we have on the right-hand side, we have this action bar. And this is kind of where you can track libraries throughout an ILL transaction. In the past, we didn't have these status updates, so a request would be filled and it would just kind of go, into the wilderness, and you wouldn't necessarily know where it was throughout an ILL transaction. But now we have these status updates, so you can kind of communicate with the other person in the transaction that way. So as a borrower, you can cancel requests. I don't have one of those up yet, but I'll show you later how to do that. You can cancel requests, you can receive an item. If you need more time with an item, you can request a renewal, and then you can return items. And we also have this new feature, perform bulk action. So this basically allows you to update multiple requests to the same status. So say you had 3 items all come in and you want to update them all at once to received. You could just click the status update you want to do, and then you just click in bulk action, the request you want to update, and then you would click submit, and they would all update to the same status. I'm just gonna undo that. We also have these filter and search options at the top. So you can locate a specific ILO number by searching. You can also search for the other library in the transaction, and then you can kind of change how you see your results. So say you want to see requests that have been received, you could just click into that and click update results, and it'll just show you requests that have been updated to that status. And so the list looks pretty similar on the lending side of things. So you have some different actions as a lender, so you can edit due dates once you have filled a request. So if you ever need to, change a due date to, you want to make it longer, you need an item to come in sooner, you can edit the due date. You can also fill requests right in from your lending request history, or you can indicate that you can't fill a request. You can approve renewals, you can deny renewals, and then you can check items back in. We do have bulk actions for lenders as well, but not as many, because a lot of the data that lenders provide is kind of specific to the item, because you can't really bulk fill requests because you might have like a different delivery method for each request or a different due date for each request. So you can, as a lender, you can bulk not fill requests. So it's like, say you got a bunch of requests and you can't fill them, you can, do a bulk action and respond to both requests that you can't fill them. And the same with check items back in. So if you have several items that need to be checked back in, you can use the bulk for that. Okay, so I'm just going to pause really quickly and just double check to see if we have any questions. And I'm also going to just take a little drink of my water. I'm going to mute myself first. Okay, so I'm going to cover statistics and the quick links a little bit later, so I'm going to kind of come back to those. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about searching now. So the SEAL catalog searches over 400 individual libraries across our region, and it kind of serves 2 distinct purposes. It's kind of a general regional catalog for the area, sort of like WorldCat, and then it also functions as the interlibrary loan catalog specifically for SEAL. And that's why at times you might see some libraries in the catalog that don't participate in the ILL side of things. And since the catalog is serving this dual purpose, we've added these search categories to make it a little easier to get directly to ILL materials. So the default search for the catalog is now all lenders, which is good to stick to if you want to get an item through ILL. But you can also narrow down further by a specific library type. Like if you want to request from an academic library, you can kind of narrow down to just academic library lenders. The catalog works through a protocol called Z39.50. So basically when you enter in a search string, the catalog will perform a live search against other libraries' catalogs to pull matching records based on whatever search terms you used. And then the system, it's kind of cool how it works. It kind of automatically overlies matching records. So it'll identify that something is same record and kind of put it onto one search result. And you can search SEAL using a variety of elements. You can use title, author, ISBN, you can use keywords. You can do like a combination title author search. You can do kind of simple queries with just keywords, and you can use more complex ones using Boolean operators. This training is just going to touch on a simple search and then using the advanced search tool. But we do have the catalog webinar in May, I think, yeah, May, that's going to go and do a little bit more of a deep dive into the catalog. So because the catalog searches such a large volume of records across our region, it works best with really, really specific searches. So an item's ISBN is often your quickest way to locate an item if you happen to know it. However, if your item has a relatively unique title or kind of a lengthy subtitle, you can usually get away with doing a title search. So I'm just going to do an example of a library themed book, Part of Our Lives, A People's History of the American Public Library. And to prevent myself from typing and it taking forever, I pre-typed it. So I'm going to go ahead and do a search for this. So when I do this search, the catalog is looking at record titles, so looking at subject headings and note fields of records to kind of come up with a potential match. And so this search was pretty successful. The book that I was searching for is my first hits. It's among my first hits. And you can see that the catalog has tried to separate each of the results by item type. So we have an ebook here, and then we have print items here. Sometimes when you do a seal search, you might see the same book separated onto two records. This is just because for whatever reason, the catalog couldn't, 100% confirm that it was the same item. And this can sometimes be due to kind of minor discrepancies in catalog records. But because SEAL is looking at all of these different parts of a record, sometimes an item title by itself is a little too broad. And this is often true if it's a single word or if it's just not a particularly unique title. One of my favorite examples to demonstrate this is from Allie Smith, who wrote a series of books with titles based on each of the individual seasons. So I'm going to try a seasonally appropriate one, spring, or I guess it will be appropriate in like another week. So if I do this search, we're going to get thousands of results back. It's still kind of chugging away. And that's just because it's way too broad because it's hitting against, titles, but also summaries, subject headings, things like that. So one really quick way to narrow down your results, if you're having this issue where, your search results are too broad, you can do advanced search, which is located at the top right hand of the search screen. Advanced search is awesome because it allows users to generate a really specific request using multiple terms at once. So you can use general keywords, you can use title, author, subjects, ISBN, and it does all the hard work of formatting a complex query correctly. So I'm just going to do a search using the title and author. So I'm going to do spring. Clearly, I've never done this before. And I'm going to do Smith Alley, kind of the way that most catalog records structure it as last name, first name. So I usually just do that to kind of limit my search a little more. But I think you could probably get away with just doing Smith and you'd probably still get a good number of hits. So you can see, you can kind of change a few things. You can change how you sort your search results. The default is relevance. You can change your results per page if you want to see more. You can narrow by category right on this page, and you can see that your query appears at the bottom of the page, so you can kind of see exactly what the catalog is going to be searching for. And you can enter complex search strings like this without coming directly to advanced search, but I sometimes find it's easier to get the formatting perfectly right by coming directly here. So I'm going to do the search. Okay, and so this search was pretty effective. Both of my results are the correct item. So now I'd like to talk about how to navigate the search results page a little bit. So at the top of the page, we have options for help, advanced search, and your search history. So clicking help will bring you to this kind of basic page that just includes some information on searching and kind of constructing a search query. And it has a little bit of information on how the catalog works. And then we have search history. So you can actually kind of go back and revert to a previous search string. So I'm going to go back to my first search, Part of Our Lives. You can also, again, as with advanced search, you can kind of change how you want to sort your results. You can sort by date, you can sort by title. Um, so on the left-hand side, we have these facets, which are another way that you can kind of narrow down your searches. So you can narrow down by a specific format. Say if you're looking specifically for a book or for a CD or something like that, you can choose a specific format. You can choose a specific source. If you know there's a particular lender that you want to get an item from, you can, narrow down by that particular library. We also have subject and author, and these both appear as word clouds. So kind of the bigger the word, the more results that have that term. So when you narrow down by a facet, it changes the string underneath the search bar. So you have format and you have this, it's kind of like an amber color, this all. And so if you want to ever move backwards and undo a facet, you can just hit all and it'll revert back to your old search. And you can also just hit the back button if you also kind of want to move back to a previous search. So you can also hover over the icon to see the list of libraries that have a particular item. And if you want to see more about the item, you can click on the library's name and it opens up this title page. So there's a few things you can do on this page. It'll bring in a little bit of information on the book. It'll also bring in a MARC record. So I'm kind of a nerd, so I like looking at MARC records, but so you can this can be helpful for verifying items and things like that. So you can kind of see what the item is. You can also view an item in its home catalog, which can be helpful sometimes for kind of verifying its availability. It should bring in the current availability status. And this might look a little bit different based on the catalog, the type of catalog a library system is using. So some bring in the full text of the availability, and then we have some that bring in like a dash, which means available. So it kind of varies from catalog to catalog. So you can click it and it'll open it right in their catalog. So you can initiate a request right from this screen. You can also initiate a request right from your search results. And both options will take you to the same page. And then the requesting screen, which I will cover in a few minutes, will provide a list of all the libraries that have the item available and are currently actively participating in sale. So it'll kind of limit out anyone who's turned themselves off as a lender, or if the item is marked as checked out, it won't appear in the lending screen. So I just want to pause again and just check to see if there's any questions. Oh, yep. I'm also going to send out the PowerPoint too, so you'll have a copy of the PowerPoint and the recording. Okay, so I'm just gonna switch gears again and then kind of go through the requesting process for materials in SEAL. For this one, I like to use kind of a test scenario, which is hopefully somewhat familiar to kind of what you might encounter in a library. So for this example, let's say I have a patron. I'm going to call him Bob, and he's very interested in the science of motivation, and he wants to read the book Drive: The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us by Daniel Pink. So I check my home library first and then my library system, and I find that the book is not currently available. I don't want to let my patron down. I hate having to say I can't get that for you. So the next thing I could try is doing a search in SEAL. So I'm going to do a search for the full title. And again, past me already did the search to make it a little easier. So I'm doing a full title search. And so you can kind of verify that you can see it's coming in, it's separating it out by item type. So I can go ahead and just start a request right here. If you're not logged in already into your SEAL account, at that point you would be prompted to log into your account. And once you log in, it'll bring you right to the screen. So the borrowing form shows your requester information. So I could just kind of like glance over and make sure that this is all kind of correct and up to date. So, and then you have a few things to kind of fill in, and some of these are optional that you don't absolutely have to fill in. So there is a space for a need by date, and need by dates can be a little tricky with interlibrary loan just because sometimes it can be hard to really estimate how long delivery and those things will take. But if an item is really a rush and your patron can't wait, this can be helpful information to include for the lender, because if they know they can't get an item to you by whatever your, like need by date is, they'll know that they can't fill the request. There's also this optional note field here. And so this is your opportunity to kind of communicate with the lender. If you have anything that's maybe like a little unique about your request or a little different, you can use that to basically communicate with them. And your note will come into the lending request they receive, so they can kind of look it over and, see if there's anything, specific that you want to share. One of the new things that we added in October was this patron name or barcode field. And again, this is totally optional. We at Southeastern, we don't need that information for your patrons. This is more of if it's helpful to you to have a patron, so you can kind of, match the request to the item that comes in. You can record a patron. And as we mentioned, it's important to follow any local policies that you might have about patron privacy. I know some schools, they're not really allowed to include, personal private information like that. So it's important to kind of be aware of that. And so you can put in a patron name or a barcode, and this will only be visible to the borrowing library. So the lender won't see your patron, but you'll be able to see it on the borrowing side. And so then you indicate if an item is a request for an article. So if it is an article, you would hit yes, and all the citation fields would display, and you would kind of fill these in as best as possible. With articles, a lot of times you can find a citation and verify it on a journal's homepage. So if you go to something like Google Scholar and do a search for the citation, you can kind of verify all of this information before you make a request. But for this example, we are requesting a book, so I'm going to hit no. And then we have another new feature, which is requesting for multiple copies. And this is something you can do if you have, let's say, like a book club, or you're doing a school project and you have, maybe 4 students who are all reading the same book. And in the past, you would have had to go through and make a request for just like one after the other for each item. But now we have this multiple request. So if you click into multiple copies, you can choose multiple libraries to request from. But again, this should be only used in those scenarios, because if you're, there's a good chance that you'll get multiple copies of the same book. If you just do it for, trying to get a book faster or something like that, it doesn't always work out. So a couple of recommendations for doing multiple copy request. We do recommend that you try to spread it out over systems if that's at all possible. And this will just prevent the book from being checked out of every library at a specific system. And I also do recommend putting in a note to the lender and letting them know that it's for, a book club or something like that, just because some lenders have kind of policies and they don't lend for book clubs. And so it can just be good information for them to have as they make a determination of whether or not they can lend your item. So for this example, I'm just doing a single request for the book, and I'm going to request it from myself. And then you would go ahead after you choose a lender and click submit. So as I mentioned, the system should filter out items that aren't available automatically, and it should also filter out people who have lending turned off or they're not receiving requests for that specific item type. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and submit. So if you ever get to that page and you don't see any libraries listed, it just means that no particular participating libraries in SEAL currently have that item available for ILO. Okay, so once you have clicked submit, basically 2 things will happen automatically. An email will be sent to the lender requesting the item, and you'll receive a copy of that email that looks like this. I'm not sure if this will actually show up. No, I don't think it will. Okay, so just for the sake of time, it's just an email that it includes all the bibliographic information on your item, and then it includes a link for you to cancel the request if you need to. And then the borrower or the lender will receive a copy of the request, and it'll have a link, yes or no, I can lend that item out. So as I mentioned, you can cancel a request right from that email, but you can also cancel a request by heading to your request status. So if we want to look at a request that we just placed, so we could actually go ahead and cancel. This is a request we just put through. So if we wanted to cancel that, you would just click cancel request, and this will send an email to the lender letting them know that the request was canceled and they don't need to fill it. So at this point in the transaction, we placed our request. We will basically just have to wait until we hear back from the lender to see if they can fill the request. So they have 5 business days to respond. And then after 3 days, they'll be sent a reminder email. And if they don't respond within 5 days, you'll have to resubmit the request to a different library. So kind of continuing with our scenario, let's say the library was able to lend the item. Our patron is very happy. Basically, if they say yes, you'll receive a confirmation email that lets you know that it was filled, and it's going to provide the shipping method and the contact email of the lending library. And so you'll be able to easily get in touch with them. And we set up, well, I say we, but it was Zach, our systems manager, set up reply to. So if you any of the emails you get from the automated seal system, if you hit reply, it'll reply to the other people in the transaction. So you would also kind of at this point just need to wait for the item to show up to your library. This can kind of take up to a week or two depending on delivery and things like that. So once it does arrive, you can check it out to your patron from your ILS. So your method for doing this might vary a little bit depending on your library's workflow. There are kind of different workflows for the different library systems do for keeping track of these. One method that I've heard of a lot is basically creating a temporary bibliographic record for a book and then checking that out to your patron. And that allows you to kind of keep track of it in the same way you would with, any other kind of book. But you can also use Seal as a way of tracking and communicating with the other person in the transaction. So I'm going to show you just really quickly how to kind of do some of the other status updates that we mentioned. So once a lender has indicated that they have filled a request, this received item option will show up automatically. And so once an item gets to your library, you can hit received. It'll ask you if you're sure. And then you can update that to received. And now the lender can see that the item was received by your library without any issues. And once you have received an item, you'll get 2 new options. So you can request a renewal. I can't say the word request right. Request a renewal, or you can return the item, indicate that you're returning it back to the lender. So if your patron ever needs more time with an item, you can request a renewal using this option. Again, you have this optional note field where you can type in any suggestions you might have, or not suggestions, anything you want to convey to the lender, like, I need more time, patron needs a couple more weeks, something like that. So this is, and then you would click submit, and basically what happens then, the lender will get an email notifying them that you've requested a renewal, and they can either approve it or they can deny it. And you'll get an email either way letting you know whether or not it was approved or if it was denied. And the last thing you can do is you can return an item. So once a patron has returned an item back to your library, you can hit return item. And you have this drop-down menu where you can basically indicate the method that you're going to use to send it back. A lot of times the method that it was used to be sent to your library is a good indicator of how you should return it. So like if it came to you via your library courier, that's a good sign that you could return it using your courier. But I'm going to talk on delivery just a little bit more when we get to kind of the lender's perspective of things. So I'm just going to choose, let's say ELD, and then we have return notes. Again, this is another optional note field. We like to include a lot of options for kind of communication between, both parties in an ILL transaction. So a lot of people will put in the notes when they returned it and what method they use. So you could say something like sent via ELD 312. And this can be helpful if you ever need to track an item down, because sometimes you have to do a little bit of interlibrary load investigation and sort of move backwards to figure out, where an item is. So sometimes having this information can be really helpful to know when it was returned. So then you would just click submit, and basically the lender will be able to see, that the item is on its way back to them. Okay, so that's it for kind of like the borrowing side of things. I'm just going to switch over to lending, and I saw we did have a question in the chat, so I'm just going to check that really quickly. How can a lending library check on items we have lent out? Is there a history of items we have lent out through sale? Yep, that's a good question, and there is a history, and that's actually perfect because that's what I'm going to move into now. So if you click lending, this will bring in the history of all your lending requests, all the requests that you have received. And each request will kind of have, specific information, the ILL number, information on the book title, and things like that. So now I'm going to kind of switch perspectives completely and view it from sort of the lending side of the equation. So in this scenario, you are the library that has Drive, and a borrowing library placed a request to you. So once the request is placed, you receive an email asking if you can lend it. And the email has, I wish I could show it to you. I can't figure out how to do this. I feel like it'll take me too long to sort of to figure out how to share it. But so the email has 2 links on the bottom that says yes, you can fill it, or no, you can't. And both of those links will actually take you to the same place as these links in your lending request history. So this is the history for the request that I just placed. So I can kind of indicate whether or not I can fill it and say, no, I can fill, no, I can't, or yes, I can. And I do recommend double checking on yourself before indicating whether or not you can fill a request, just because sometimes it does happen where a catalog says that an item should be on the shelf and it's not. And then you kind of have to go back to the borrower and say, I can actually send that. So it's always good to just check first and then respond to the request. And the responding to these requests is something that we do ask all seal users to do. Even if you can't fill it, it's really helpful for the borrower to know one way or the other, because then they'll know right away, oh, I need to request this from another library and things like that. So if you determine you can't lend the item, you can select no, can't fill. And this basically brings you to a screen where you can indicate why you couldn't lend the item. And supplying this information is useful for the borrowing library as they work on trying to find a new lender. So for instance, you could say the item is currently checked out, it's in use, and some people will kind of put in a note like, oh, it's not available now, but 2 weeks if you request it again, it might be available. So this can be really helpful information to supply to the borrowing library. However, if you can lend it, you've determined that you can send it, you can click yes, we'll fill, and this will open up the ILO response. And as I mentioned, if you click on yes in the email as well, it'll bring you right to the screen. So you can kind of do it however, whichever method works best for you. So one of the newer seal suggestion or features are delivery suggestions. And as I mentioned earlier in the training, these are generated based off the delivery options that you've indicated in your library profile. And suggestions will appear under recommended shipping methods. And these suggestions only appear if both you and the borrower have access to the same resource. So I mentioned that I was going to show you where to find some more information on delivery. So we have these quick links, which are just sort of helpful links for using Seal, like an FAQ, this support request, which will bring you to like an email that you can send to us. And then we also link to training resources. So this is a LibGuide that we have for Seal. And we have, I'm just gonna make this a little bigger. We have a delivery tab, and this kind of breaks down delivery for specific library systems. It has some information on ELD, and then it has some best practices for mailing through delivery vendors. So this can be a really good place to come if you have any sort of questions about delivery. And I'm also always happy to help figure out any delivery questions. And if it's like a kind of a system question, I can direct you to kind of the right person to ask about that. So kind of back to our request. Again, it has a note field. A lot of people, again, will use this to include notes about the delivery method they used. You can also indicate a due date. One important thing to know about due dates is that due dates are the date that the item should be returned to the borrowing library. So lenders in Seal can kind of choose their own due date. I do encourage offering longer due dates when it's possible, just because sometimes it can take 1 to 2 weeks for an item to arrive, and you really want to make sure the patron has some time with the item. So I'm going to try to pick a due date that's 6 weeks from now. And then again, you can choose the shipping method you use from the drop-down menu. I'm just going to pick a random one. All right, and then you would click submit. And again, this will generate an email to the borrowing library, letting them know that you filled the request. So at this point, you would just kind of mail the item off to its destination, whichever method works best. And again, you can use your home ILS system to track the item. This again, it kind of varies depending on specific procedures for your systems and for library catalogs. The most common method that I've seen is to add the borrowing library as an ILL patron, and a lot of them might already be in a catalog as an ILL patron, and then basically you would check the item out to them there. I'm running out of time. I was a little worried that I think we can make it though, but I wanted to just show you a few other things. So as I mentioned, there are some status updates for the lender side of the transaction. So I showed you again this edit due date feature. So once a request has been filled, you can change the due date and you can put in a new due date for an item and then click submit. As I mentioned, Seal can be used to fill renewal requests. So if the borrowing library does request a renewal, you'll receive an email basically asking if you can extend the due date. And similarly to the initial lending emails you receive, you can respond to this request directly from the email or by going into your lending request history. So I'm going to show you where to do that in this history. This is kind of an old request. So if you want to approve the renewal, you can click approve renewal. You can type in a new due date, and then you can put any renewal notes. Again, this is totally optional, just the way of kind of communicating with the other library if you need to. If you can't give any longer for the item, and again, whether or not you approve a renewal, that's totally up to the lender. Sometimes you might have holds on an item, so it can't really be extended. So that's totally up to your library to determine. You can also deny it, and then again, optionally, you can put in comments about why the renewal was denied. And so to kind of end today's fake ILL transaction, let's say Bob returned the book to his library and you received the item back at your library. So you can basically finish this by sort of checking the item back in, and this will complete the transaction and kind of assure the borrowing library that you received the item back without any issues. So to do this, you can click check item back in, and this check item back in feature will show up automatically after 30 days or when a library has indicated that they returned an item, whichever happens first. And then you can basically just mark the item as returned, click submit, and then it'll update the status. So there are just two last things I wanted to show you really quickly before we kind of come up to the end of the hour. So as I mentioned, I think I mentioned this previously, we have an ILL directory, and this directory will list all of the participating Seal libraries in alphabetical order. So you can kind of search for a specific library. You can also narrow down by library system if you want to, see the libraries that are in a particular system. And SunnyLurk is kind of the catch-all for academic and special and hospital libraries. So I can do a search for SunnyLurk, and every directory entry will display libraries information, the contact email for them, and if you click, and it'll also say if they're currently accepting requests. And if you click show loaning options, it'll also show the material types that they are currently lending. So this is kind of where you can go to find contact information on a library if you need it. It can also be helpful if you're delivering something to a library. You can kind of verify their address, make sure everything is accurate. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was statistics. So Seal has a great and really easy to use statistics tool, which you can use to generate data on what you borrowed and lent. And this can be helpful if you ever need to do like board reports, if you need to report on your borrowing or lending activity, or you just want to see trends in your activity, like who you're borrowing from, who you're lending to, things like that. So if you click You can choose the option based on, what information you need. So if you need borrowing information, click borrowing, and then you just enter in a date, the date range for the data you want. And mine is gonna, oh, I've been doing fake requests, so mine is gonna look a little emptier than probably, a typical libraries would, since I've been only doing fake requests. But so basically it brings in the raw data. So it'll tell you how many requests you placed, and then it'll kind of break it down further. How many of those requests were filled, how many expired, how many aren't answered yet, and things like that. And it also does this cool thing where it breaks down requests further, and it breaks them down by system. And then within system, it breaks them down to item type. So you could kind of see, all the requests that you've placed to, say, academic libraries, and you could see how many, books, how many DVDs, all of that. So it kind of shows you a lot of information about your borrowing and lending activity. And then the very last thing I wanted to show you was the LibGuide. And this is kind of where you can go for additional help on SEAL, and it kind of provides some helpful resources on a lot of things we went over today. So we have a SEAL manual, which has a linked table of contents. So it'll kind of break it down, by specific SEAL functions. We have training videos. The short videos are all about like 5 minutes each. We have an FAQ. I do a monthly newsletter for SEAL, which kind of advertises like upcoming events and things like that. And then in this additional tools option, this is where the regional ILO code and the procedures are linked. And as I mentioned, these kind of outline some broad guidelines for resource sharing. So they can be really helpful to read through as you start using SEAL, because it'll kind of provide some insight on how to deal with kind of certain tricky or, unusual ILO situations. And you can also always reach out to me if you have any questions, or if you're unsure of the best way to handle, a particular situation. And we are having a webinar next month that is going to do a deep dive into these documents. We didn't, because it's a lot to talk about. And as I mentioned, I do think they are really helpful. So I thought that they warranted their own whole training. So that webinar is going to cover interlibrary loan best practices. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and stop this share. So just wanted to check in before we ended to see if there were any questions or anything like that. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email me. My email is kelsey@sailork.org, and I'm just going to put that into the chat. And I am going to we'll send out the recording, and we'll also send out the PowerPoint. So thanks everybody for attending. I really appreciate it. And yeah, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to shoot me an email. Thank you.